bringing that into our community. Susan's talking about grace and gratitude. I've known Susan for quite some years now, since she walked through the doors in the early 2000s, about 2004 or so, I think. And it's been wonderful to see her blossoming from someone who's afraid to read the daily word, hung out, she says, in the back pews and in the around the bookstore, and would sneak out as quickly as possible. And so here she is now, having served as our president for 2 years? 4 years, and on our board for 6. And she's become a spiritual life coach. She leads women's groups. She is active in many ways beyond Unity, and we're so delighted that she's so active in our community. Let's find out what Susan Cullen's going to share with us today around grace and gratitude.
So when I first, writing these talks is always quite the process. And when I first sort of thought, okay, well, what's the inspiration? And what came was, grace and gratitude. Grace and gratitude, excellent. Okay, that's what I'll do. What is the link between grace and gratitude? Yeah, that sounds really good. What is the link? So then when I went to actually write down my talk and begin to say, what is it that I was going to share with you this morning? Okay, gratitude. Okay, got gratitude, no problem. Gratitude, I understand it, it's good. I talked a little bit about that. I did a short talk on Thanksgiving, if you were here, or expanded on gratitude, exactly what Anthony was saying in terms of, what is it that we can do to be grateful for all the experiences we have in our life, right? And then came grace. And I'm like, grace? Do you say the word? No, yeah, chokes on her coffee. Yeah, grace. Grace was a whole lot more elusive when I started to try and pin it down. And so then I started asking people, what do you think grace is, right? I put it on Facebook, and a bunch of people answered, and I went searching, and I researched what grace is, and I got like 100 different answers, and I thought, well, this isn't helpful. This isn't helpful. And then I came across a quote by St. Augustine. It said, what is grace? I had this enough. Okay. What is grace? I know until you ask me. And if you ask me, then I don't know. And I thought, isn't that exactly what grace is, right? So when I went to actually sort of try and nail it down, I was trying to nail Jell-O, and I just couldn't really get a grasp of it. And so gratitude is a feeling. We can feel gratitude. Grace, I decided, by the way, just as since there are hundreds, thousands of definitions of what grace actually is, this is mine. This is what you're getting today is what I've come up with. So you can take what fits for you and leave what does not. So for me, what I realized is that grace is not a feeling as much as it's an experience. It's a felt experience, which kind of is a combination of a number of feelings that would include love, surrender, appreciation, peace, but kind of all at the same time. It's expansion, it's a felt sense. I think we've all had those moments show up in our lives, right? So then I was thinking, what is the connection between grace and gratitude? Because gratitude is, it's a feeling, it's an action, and grace is this felt experience. And at first, the only thing that I could come up with was that they both started with G-R-A. That was my starting point. Thinking, wow, this is going to be a short talk. And then I started reflecting on one of the most profound experiences of grace that I had in my life. So it's a story that I have shared before, but in a slightly different context. So one day, I dropped the kids off at school. I was driving through downtown, and I was stopped at a red light. And where I was stopped, waiting for the light to turn green, there was, on the street over, this 2 fire trucks went screaming by with their lights flashing, and then the ambulance went by, and as I was sitting here at the red light, you know, a block over, I suddenly became aware of my thoughts, and they were something like this. Oh my God, imagine what would happen if our house burned down. What if Rob died? How would he handle the kids? What if the kids died? Wow, what if I died? Wonder what would happen. What a horrible thing it would be. What if we died in a fire? And I'm like, so suddenly I'm tuned in and I'm listening to this going, wow, that's interesting. And then I tuned into my body and I felt myself holding my breath, and my stomach was clenched, right? With these thoughts, these thoughts and these worries. Now be clear, at this moment, I'm sitting at a red light on the street. None of this is happening except in here, right? That's the only place where it's all happening, right? And so at that moment, I took a breath. And suddenly, I felt this energy descend down through my body, through my whole body. And it was an energy of, well, what I would now say is grace. It was love, it was peace, it was expansion, it was acceptance. And what I realized was that every single thing that had happened in my life up till this point had been what I would say is perfect. Not perfect as in it was great or it was wonderful. I had lots of moments that were extremely painful and traumatic, and that, however, even those moments left me with phenomenal gifts, right? So what I realized in that moment was that if everything up till that point, the good, the bad, the ugly, had served me in some way, then surely that meant that everything that was going to happen would also serve me in some way, if I was able to look at it that way, right? And with that thought came another wave of the peace. And those worrying thoughts actually ended on that day. That constant worry loop of what could happen actually did end for me on that day, which is quite extraordinary, and quite an extraordinary moment of grace, right? Sitting at a red light, waiting, and then the light turned green. This happened all in a matter of, how long is a red light? A minute and a half, right? And yet, it was incredibly transformative experience. So that got me thinking, well, so where does grace come from, right? Well, in the old model, the model of God that I grew up with, God is out there with his laptop and long beard, handing out punishment and grace, right, as he sees fit, right? And it's not for us to know that, whatever is in the mind of God would be given to us accordingly, whether we're getting grace or we're getting punishment. But in the unity philosophy, there is only one source. And that source runs in and through everything. Which means that it is in and through me, as well as all the experiences, all the people, all the rocks, all the buildings, everything. It is all made up of this. And if grace is part of that one source, which it must be, then that means that grace must be flowing 24/7. Right? Are you with me?
Yeah.
I know. So then I thought, well, if that's true, then how come I don't experience it 24/7? Right? what is in the way of me experiencing it 24/7? And I thought, oh, I know what's in the way. You got it? It's me, right? It's me. But it's not all of me, it's part of me. So a year ago, roughly a year ago, I did a talk called Love, It's More Than a Feeling, about the model of Barbara Marx Hubbard. And so if you want more details on that, I invite you to go look. I think it's on our YouTube channel if you want more information about that. But what her model basically says is that there's two parts of ourselves. We have the ego part of ourselves, and we have the divine part of ourselves. And very often we have this experience of jumping back and forth, right? So Sunday morning, we can sit here in our divine part of ourselves and get all juicy and all feeling all connected and graceful. And then, of course, we have this ego part of ourselves, which happens as soon as somebody cuts us off in traffic, right? Or somebody says the wrong thing, right? And what her model is about integrating, bringing in those ego pieces, that part of us, because the ego is what we need to function in this world, right? But to bring it into that divine self that we are. And the more that we can integrate and bring that into our divine self, and have our divine self be the one who's driving the bus, so to speak, rather than our ego, because our ego is much more limited in time and space. So again, if you want to know more about that, I'm just going to briefly touch on that. You can go to the other YouTube talk that I did. So I was thinking, grace is flowing 24/7, and what's in the way is me. What's really in the way is when I am not in my divine self or in that integrated place, which Barbara Marx Hubbard calls the beloved. Right? So how can we be more in that place? Well, one of the ways that we can do that is through gratitude. Right? Gratitude is one of the vehicles that we can use. And that is the connection between grace and gratitude, right? That is what is the connection of how to begin to experience more grace. So what is grace? Grace is one of the divine feminine gifts. It is one of the divine feminine energies, which means that for women, we embody grace in ourselves. Men have an energy of it too, but it's expressed differently in men. It's expressed through action, as opposed to women who embody it, it's more expressed in being. We can also express it in action, but that's sort of the natural difference between men and women. So, what Doug was talking about last week was this idea of circulation and flow, right? So if grace is available 24/7, and what we need to do is to open to it, and gratitude is one of the ways that we can sort of prepare that foundation to allow for more grace moments to show up in our lives, then what is the outflow? So that is the inflow, then what is the outflow? So as I said, for women, the outflow is that beingness of grace. And for men, it's more in the action of grace. So what about gratitude? Gratitude. As Anthony said, gratitude for all that is, right? Gratitude is a perception in large part. So the more that we can focus on being grateful for everything that shows up, the more we can be in that energy of gratitude prepare the foundation. So I remember a number of months ago, I was at a women's group, and there was a women's circle, and everybody had the chance to have the talking stick, and to go around with the talking stick. And the talking stick came around, and I was listening, because I was one of the last people, and all these women had all these issues, these big issues happening in their lives, and thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say? Because my life's pretty good. I don't know what I would say. And so it did come around to me, and I don't remember what I said, something. And I came home that night, and I said to my husband, I said, wow, it was so strange. I had this, I was listening to all these women, and they had these big issues, and I felt kind of guilty that I had nothing, right? And he said, that's not true. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you've got this, and you've got this, and you've got this, and you've got this, and you've got this. And I thought, oh, when you put it that way. Right?
I'm a mess.
Yeah. And it's funny because I asked him last night, I said, you remember that time a couple months ago when you said, I can't even remember what the issue, I literally can't remember what the issues were. But the time when he said it, it was like, oh yeah. But literally it was when you say it that way, then it sounds like a problem, right? So one of the real keys to gratitude is to just have it be as it is, to have a level of acceptance of what is showing up in any moment, right? On Dr. Hawkins' model or map of consciousness, acceptance comes in at like 350, which is kind of like in the middle of the top, right? So it's quite a high state of consciousness to be in that place. So if we were going to flow, have more gratitude, and therefore bring more grace in our life, what would that look like? Well, I think number one is right here, right? It begins with ourselves. It begins with giving ourselves grace. It begins with us having gratitude for us, for all of who we are, for all the unconscious places, all the places of shame, all the places of doubt, all the places where, the places that we don't want to acknowledge even exist within us, right? It also means, just because we accept all that, doesn't mean that we don't then do something about it. As we are called to heal, as life shows up, I think that's what we're all here for, right? We are here to come together in that integrated way to heal all those wounded places that we have within. And we can be grateful for ourselves and all of what we bring to the world. That's the place to begin. Because then we can start flowing it out of us and into the world. So what does it mean to have grace for somebody else? Well, gratitude, we all got gratitude, right? Grace is the one that's a little bit more elusive. So what does that look like? Well, for me, what that looks like is really being present with whoever you're with in the moment, giving them your full presence. Deep listening, deep appreciation, right? Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. Maybe they'll say something that, you find, dare we say, offensive. You could just be curious and go, wow, that's an interesting perspective. I see things a different way, as we all do, right? Imagine what the world would be like if we could actually be that way, flow that grace with that appreciation for ourselves, and then bring it out to others. Another way is to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? To stop jumping to conclusions, jumping to assumptions, jumping to judgment about somebody before you know the full story, before you know the full information, right? Give them the benefit of the doubt and then see what happens. And it doesn't mean It doesn't mean that you have no boundaries and then everybody's stepping over you. No, in fact, when you are solid within yourself, you have that clarity of boundaries, and you have that clarity of, I don't know what to call it, alignment within, and just that alone affects other people, right? So I invite you to make your life your spiritual practice, right? To take whatever shows up, and if you know and understand that this thing, whatever has shown up, has the possibility of bringing you gifts, right? The gifts can't come until you fully accept it. So I've said that we can prepare the ground, that we have something to do, that we can increase this flow of grace in our life. And yet, I will also say, at the same time, that grace is still very mysterious, right? It can show up whether you've prepared the ground or not, right? Certainly, I had many moments of grace that I didn't know were grace at that time, but when I look back now, I realize they were, and I assure you, I had not prepared the ground. I was not in that place. And there's one in particular, being that this is November 11th, the 100-year anniversary of World War I. I think we're all familiar with the story of, in 1914, on Christmas Eve, when the troops were in the trenches, the British on the one side, the Germans on the other. And it's not clear who started first, but one of them started singing a Christmas carol, and then the others sang the Christmas carol. And they sang back and forth for a while, and then they started to sing the same Christmas carol with the different words. And then people started coming out of the trenches. There was a ceasefire, like sort of a spontaneous ceasefire that happened. And they all met in the middle. They talked about their lives, they shared photos of their loved ones. They traded, they gave gifts of cigarettes and chocolate and whatever things they had. Surely that's an example of grace just showing up. Grace showing up in the midst of one of the most bloodiest, horrible battles. Right? And I can only imagine what it felt like when the leaders then began to insist that they stop doing that and start fighting again. Yeah. And still, I think all of those who participated must have been touched in their heart. So I'm going to end with a quick quote that I found by Serge Mazzarand, who's a pianist and an author. And he said, "When we feel grateful in our hearts, are authentically grateful for the gift of life, we connect with the God force within. Gratefulness creates vibrancy, an awareness and sense of inner contentment that is joy of living and bliss, which I call grace." Thank you so much.
Having trouble finding it. Hang on. Here we go.
We are held in the hands of grace, forever safe in the arms of love. Like a child receives protection from a mother's warm embrace. We are held in the hands of grace. We are held in the hands of grace, forever safe in the arms of love. A child receives protection from a mother's warm embrace. We are held in the hands of grace.
And I invite you to take a deep breath in And let it go. And taking another deep breath in. And as you let it go, letting go of whatever is on your mind, what is separating you right now from your true divine self. I invite you to take your presence and your awareness to your heart. And imagine that you are now breathing through your heart chamber. That beautiful air flowing through the chambers of your heart. Connecting you, aligning you with that divine part of yourself. Imagining now that you have roots growing from the soles of your feet deep into Mother Earth, grounding and rooting and connecting you to her love and her support. And feeling that love begin to rise up from the depths of Mother Earth, up through your legs, through your body, until it reaches your head where it opens like a flower. Opening to that divine flow of grace. Allowing it to wash over you, down through your head and into your body. Feeling deep appreciation for who you are, all of who you are. Allowing this grace to move into wounded places, places of trauma, moving into unconscious spaces, moving into places of pain. Not to change them, but just allowing them to be. To be held in the hands of grace. And I invite you now to just really bask in this beautiful energy of grace and appreciation. Through every cell in your body. Forgive yourself for any ways in which you rejected parts of you. Forgive yourself and give yourself grace for the times that you're triggered and you reacted. yourself compassion. Feel yourself being held in the hands of grace, safe in the arms of love. Knowing that this is the truth of who you are, 24/7. And give yourself grace and forgiveness for forgetting that sometimes. Because we all do. And taking a deep breath in, bringing yourself once again present to this room.